There is something deeply unsettling that happens in the human mind when something it expected simply is not there. When the presence it had mapped, catalogued, taken completely for granted, suddenly goes quiet, goes still, disappears. Not with drama, not with announcement, not with the theatrical exit of someone making a point, just gone. And what follows that disappearance is one of the most psychologically powerful phenomena in all of human behavior. The mind that took you for granted begins to search. The person who ignored your messages begins to wonder why theirs are not being answered. The one who withdrew their attention to keep you in place begins to feel the disorienting unfamiliarity of a space where you no longer are. And the pursuit begins, quietly at first, then with an urgency that surprises even them. Today we are going into the dark psychology of absence, into the ancient, ruthless, completely counterintuitive truth about why disappearing is the most powerful move available to you. Stay until the very end, because the final principle in this video is the one that separates the people who use absence as a strategy from the people who live it as a way of being. And the difference between those two is everything. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the known world, Emperor of Rome, commander of the greatest army in human history. And yet, the quality that made him genuinely powerful, the quality that the people around him felt before he ever spoke a word, had nothing to do with his title or his armies or the weight of his office. It was something far simpler, far more primal, far more psychologically devastating to the people who encountered it without understanding what they were experiencing. He was never fully there. Not in the sense of being absent from his responsibilities, not in the sense of being emotionally unavailable in a damaged or broken way, in the sense that his complete presence, his full, undivided, entirely given attention and energy, was never just available, never simply there for the taking. When Marcus Aurelius gave you his complete attention, you felt it as a gift, as something rare, as something that had not been given to the person before you and would not automatically be given to the person after you. And because of this, because his presence carried the psychological weight of something genuinely scarce, it was valued in a way that constant presence can never be valued. The people around him worked for it, prepared for it, were careful with it when they had it. This is the dark psychology of absence, and it is available to you, not as a trick, not as a game, not as the shallow manipulation of someone who is pretending to be less interested than they actually are, as the genuine, deeply lived, completely authentic expression of a person who has something more interesting to do than be endlessly available to whoever wants them. The human brain is, at its most fundamental level, a scarcity detection machine. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. The reward pathways in the brain, the systems that generate desire, motivation, and pursuit are calibrated not to the absolute value of things, but to their relative availability. What is scarce is precious. What is abundant is background. What requires effort to obtain is valued in proportion to the effort required. This is why the meal you had to wait for tastes better than the one placed in front of you immediately. Why the person who takes time to respond feels more interesting than the one who replies instantly. Why the presence that is not always guaranteed produces in the people around it a quality of attention and investment that constant availability never generates. The brain is running a continuous unconscious calculation. Is this worth pursuing? Is this worth investing in? Is this worth my energy and attention and emotional resources? And the single most powerful input into that calculation, more powerful than quality, more powerful than compatibility, more powerful than almost any other variable, is availability. When something is always there, the brain assigns it low pursuit value. When something is unpredictably available, present sometimes, absent other times, never fully predictable, the pursuit system activates, and once it activates, it does not easily turn off. This is the psychological mechanism behind the dark power of absence. And Marcus Aurelius understood it not as a strategy, but as a natural consequence of living a life rich enough that you could never simply be endlessly available to anyone who wanted you. The human brain is, at its most fundamental level, a scarcity detection machine. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. The reward pathways in the brain, the systems that generate desire, motivation, and pursuit, are calibrated not to the absolute value of things, but to their relative availability. What is scarce is precious. What is abundant is background. What requires effort to obtain is valued in proportion to the effort required. This is why the meal you had to wait for tastes better than the one placed in front of you immediately. Why the person who takes time to respond feels more interesting than the one who replies instantly. Why the presence that is not always guaranteed produces in the people around it a quality of attention and investment that constant availability never generates. The brain is running a continuous unconscious calculation. Is this worth pursuing? Is this worth investing in? Is this worth my energy and attention and emotional resources? And the single most powerful input into that calculation, more powerful than quality, more powerful than compatibility, more powerful than almost any other variable, is availability. When something is always there, the brain assigns it low pursuit value. When something is unpredictably available, present sometimes, absent other times, never fully predictable, the pursuit system activates. And once it activates, it does not easily turn off. This is the psychological mechanism behind the dark power of absence. And Marcus Aurelius understood it not as a strategy, but as a natural consequence of living a life rich enough that you could never simply be endlessly available to anyone who wanted you.
Epictetus wrote something that appears at first to be about something else entirely. He wrote, Never say about anything that I have lost it. Only say I have given it back. He was talking about acceptance, about the Stoic practice of holding things lightly. But beneath the surface of this teaching is a principle about presence that goes directly to the heart of everything we are discussing. When you hold your presence lightly, when you relate to it as something you give rather than something you owe, the entire dynamic of your relationships changes at the most fundamental level. You are no longer the reliably available resource that people have learned to take for granted. You are someone who chooses where to be and who to be with and when. And that quality of choice, that visible, felt, completely real quality of being somewhere because you chose it rather than because you had nowhere else to go, is one of the most magnetically attractive things one human being can communicate to another. People are drawn to those who clearly have options, who are clearly choosing them rather than defaulting to them, who could be elsewhere and have selected here. And when you develop genuine fullness in your own life, when you have work that absorbs you and ideas that interest you, and a relationship with your own mind rich enough that solitude is not something you flee, your absences become natural, not manufactured, not strategic, natural. And natural absence is infinitely more powerful than performed absence because it cannot be argued with. It cannot be accused of games. It is simply the visible evidence of a person who has more than one place to be.
Let us now talk about what genuine absence actually does to the psychology of the people around you, because this is where the dark mechanics become visible, and understanding them clearly will help you recognize what is happening in your relationships when you begin to live this way. The first thing absence does is force a recalibration. When you have been consistently present, reliably responsive, predictably available, the people around you have built a mental model of you that includes your constant presence as a background condition. It is not something they think about, it is something they assume. The way you assume the floor will be there when you step off the bed in the morning. You do not check, you do not appreciate it, you simply rely on it without awareness. The moment that floor disappears, the moment your presence is no longer reliably there, the recalibration begins. Suddenly, the background is not background anymore. It is foreground. It is noticed. It is missed in a way it was never appreciated when it was present. The second thing absence does is transfer attention. When you are always there, always responding, always engaging, always accessible, the attention in the relationship flows primarily toward you. You are present, they are receiving, the dynamic is established. But the moment you are not there, the moment your presence becomes uncertain, the attention transfers. The person who was receiving begins to give, begins to reach, begins to invest the energy and attention that was previously available without effort. And this transfer, this shift from receiving to pursuing, changes the fundamental nature of the power dynamic in ways that cannot be easily reversed. The third thing absence does, and this is the darkest and most powerful, is activate imagination. The brain does not simply register absence and move on. It fills absence, it builds, it constructs, it populates the empty space with versions of you that are often more compelling, more interesting, more significant than anything your constant presence could have produced. Because presence is specific. Presence has limitations, imperfections, ordinary moments that reduce mystery. Absence is whatever the mind decides to make of it, and minds, given space to work, almost always decide to make something magnificent. This is why the most strategically brilliant practitioners of absence throughout history were never absent chaotically. They were absent purposefully. They understood that absence creates a canvas, and that the canvas is only as powerful as what the other person's mind decides to paint on it. And what the mind paints is almost always shaped by the last clear impression you left before disappearing. Marcus Aurelius was meticulous about this. The impression he left was consistently one of complete composure, complete purpose, complete self-possession. When he withdrew from a room, when his attention shifted elsewhere, the impression that remained was of a man who had somewhere more important to be, not someone fleeing, not someone punishing, someone genuinely pulled by the gravity of his own life. And the minds he left behind filled his absence accordingly, with someone worth pursuing, worth earning, worth the investment of their best efforts to be considered worthy of his presence. This is the power of deliberate absence, not the power of withholding, the power of having a life so genuinely full, so authentically demanding, that your absence is simply the natural byproduct of someone who is actually somewhere else, doing something real, building something that matters, living in a way that makes your presence a gift rather than a default. Now, let us address the question that most people arrive at when they begin to understand this psychology. Is this manipulation? And the honest answer is, it depends entirely on the quality of the absence. Strategic absence, the kind performed by someone who is counting minutes and waiting for a reaction, is manipulation. And it produces the results manipulation always produces: short-term movement followed by resentment. The other person eventually recognizes what is happening, eventually feels the game beneath the surface, and eventually, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once, the trust dissolves. But genuine absence, the kind that emerges naturally from a person who is actually absorbed in something real, is not manipulation. It is the authentic expression of a life being fully lived. And it produces the results authenticity always produces: deeper respect, more careful attention, a quality of investment from the people around you that strategic absence can never quite replicate. Because people can feel the difference, not always consciously, not always in a way they could put into words, but the felt sense of someone who is genuinely elsewhere and someone who is performing being elsewhere is measurably different at the psychological level. And only one of them produces the full power of what we have been discussing. Marcus Aurelius was genuinely elsewhere. His mind was genuinely occupied with things that mattered to him: his philosophy, his governance, his daily practice of becoming more completely himself. He was not performing absence. He was living a life that made his presence genuinely intermittent, because it was genuinely full, and the people around him felt the difference. The path to genuine absence begins with genuine fullness, and genuine fullness begins with a single question that most people never ask seriously. What am I actually building? Not what am I supposed to be building? Not what would look impressive to the people watching? What is the thing that, when I am absorbed in it, hours pass like minutes? What is the work that calls for my best attention and gives something real back when I give it? What is the practice, the project, the pursuit that makes my solitude feel full rather than empty? Because until you have an honest answer to that question, until you have something real to be genuinely absent into, your absences will be hollow, performed rather than lived. And the people around you will feel that hollowness beneath whatever surface the performance creates. Find what genuinely absorbs you. Invest in it seriously. Let it make genuine demands on your time and attention and energy. And then let your relationships organize around the reality of someone whose life is genuinely full, rather than someone who is strategically managing their availability. Marcus Aurelius found this in philosophy, in the daily practice of understanding himself and his place in the world with ever greater precision. And that practice, that genuine, completely absorbing, endlessly demanding practice, is what made his presence genuinely intermittent and therefore genuinely powerful. The final principle is the one that separates the people who use this as a strategy from the people who live it as a way of being. And it is this: the dark power of absence does not ultimately belong to the people who disappear to get something. It belongs to the people who disappear because they are somewhere else. Because they have a life so genuinely rich, so authentically demanding, so completely their own, that being elsewhere is not a choice they make about other people. It is a fact about themselves. And when you are that person, when your absences are the natural overflow of a life being fully lived, something happens in the people around you that no strategy could produce. They begin to value not just your presence, they begin to value the version of themselves they are when they are with you. Because your full, genuine, completely self-possessed presence, when it arrives, is so different from the constant, taken-for-granted availability they are used to that it elevates the entire exchange. It makes them more careful, more attentive, more deliberate about what they bring to the space you are temporarily sharing. Because they know, at a level below words, that this is not guaranteed. That you were somewhere else before, that you will be somewhere else after. That this moment is what it is, not because they have you, but because you chose to be here. And that quality, the quality of being chosen by someone who has other options, is one of the rarest and most psychologically powerful experiences available in human relationships. Disappear into your life. Build something real to be absent into. Let your presence become the gift it was always meant to be. Subscribe to Dark Stoic. Every single week we go this deep into the psychology the most powerful people in history actually lived. This is only the beginning. Subscribe and begin building the life that makes your absence the most powerful thing about you.